Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and for months now, Britain has been anticipating a general election when Parliament finally admits that it is broken, and all the talk is of how a new Parliament would look. So how would people vote in a general election? And we got a little taste of that in the town of Peterborough yesterday due to a by-election. The former Labour MP who won the seat in 2017 disgraced herself a little by being convicted of speeding offences and then convicted and jailed for perjury when she tried to get away from said offences. Such naughtiness then allowed her constituents to trigger a by-election using a fairly recent law that has never been used up until now. So Peterborough is a marginal constituency, and it always has been in modern times. Whoever wins there only does so by a small margin, sometimes as low as single figures. In other words, it's not the sort of place where you live if you intend to live a long career as an MP. It also tends to vote with the general mood of the population. They overwhelmingly vote either Labour or the Conservatives, with other parties not really getting a look in, until now. When the Conservatives are in the ascendancy, the seat tends to go to them. When Labour are, then, it goes to them when they're doing well in the country. But this time around, polls had predicted a Brexit Party win. The town did vote leave in the referendum a few years ago with 61% of its voters. And as is usual for by-elections, party leaderships descended upon the town to campaign very hard for it. It was very important for Labour, for the Conservatives and for the Brexit Party in order to not only get some momentum themselves, but to take away momentum from their opponents. Now, Theresa May was the only major party leader not to campaign directly there, but her presence might not have been considered a boost for the Tories, so I guess that's why she stayed away. But various Conservative leadership hopefuls did campaign there, including Boris Johnson. In the end, thankfully, Labour won the seat with a different candidate this time, of course, and even increased their majority. But it's still Peterborough, and that majority is still well under 1,000. Now, in terms of what this means for the country, it is, of course, a worrying sign. In the past, anti-EU parties have tended to do well in the European elections and made an impression in local elections as well. Now, as I've talked about in the past, many voters don't take those sort of elections seriously in themselves, and they use them to send a message to MPs in the Commons. Sometimes it's an encouraging message. Sometimes it's a warning if they don't start listening. But in Westminster elections, people can apply different priorities. For a start, quite a lot of people do not vote along a single issue. But are they at the moment with Brexit on? But people at least that do vote in them do take them more seriously. At least the people who bother to vote do. But of course, they are the only ones who count in an election. Literally. In elections to the House of Commons, these populists have never really made ground. UKIP technically returned an MP in 2015, but that was a former Conservative MP who defected and seemed to be respected enough in the area to have won the seat under a different party. It was soon lost in 2017. But there's a feeling that things could be different were a general election to be held this year, or even early next year. Peterborough even showed it. The Brexit Party may not have won, but they weren't far off. Were elections to be held across the country, they could certainly win some seats. And that is, of course, rather worrying. However, Peterborough also showed something else that I have been convinced about before the results ever came through. The Brexit Party is taking votes predominantly off the Conservatives. Labour achieved a smaller share of the vote in Peterborough compared to 2017. We'll have to use percentages to have a little look at the data because the turnout was much less than last time. Now, in 2017, Labour won 30.9% of the vote, but in 2017, it was 48.1%. So they have lost 17.2% share of the vote. Now, some of this may have gone to the Brexit Party. The Brexit Party votes are certainly not accounted for purely in the loss from the Conservative share, which went down from 46.8% in 2017 to 21.4% this week, right? Beasting for them. But as has been shown in the elections during May, Labour are mostly losing their votes to the Liberal Democrats and Green Party with their clear message on a public vote with remaining in the EU as an option. The Liberal Democrats and Green Party gained 10.3% share. Now, those parties were nowhere in previous general elections. This time, all right, they were not going to win the seat, but it was a massively increased share. 10.3% increase on their previous share. as compared to 2017. We should also remember that in a marginal constituency, there would have been a lot of people voting Labour that may not have done so in the European elections to at least stop the Conservatives or the Brexit Party winning as well. Transferring their votes to the Lib Dems or Green just because they're clearer on remaining in the EU isn't practical in this scenario because those parties had no chance of winning it. Under other circumstances, what I'm saying is that Labour may have lost more votes. The Brexit Party won 28.9% of the votes as a share. Now, the Conservatives lost 25.4% share. So if we assume that that loss of the share from the Conservatives went entirely to the Brexit Party, we can't be certain, but it seems not unreasonable that the vast majority of it would anyway, but I'll just assume it did. So it's probably fair to say that 3.5% came from Labour if we take away the increased share on the Lib Dems and Greens. So if you add the 3.5% of Labour support that may have gone to the Brexit Party to the 10.3% gain of the Lib Dems and Greens, that's an estimated 13.8% of the vote lost by Labour in this election compared to 2017 to those three parties. But Labour lost a 17.2% share of the vote. So there's another 3.4% not accounted for. Well, there were some other parties who picked up the odd few hundred here and there, but nothing substantial. But it could be that there were, and in fact I'm convinced there was, a larger proportion of Labour voters that simply didn't vote this time. Now, as I've already said, the number of voters that took part in this by-election was way less than in the last general election. However, it seems to me that the only explanation is that a much higher proportion of Labour voters compared to other parties didn't bother to vote at all. Now, I can understand the reasons. I, as a Labour member myself, I have to say I would have turned up and I would have voted Labour. But I can maybe understand some of the thinking here. So the feeling of Remain supporting socialists in the town, for example, may have been, well, you don't want to vote for a Remain party because they have no chance of winning. So what's the point? But on the other hand, maybe you feel that you can't back Labour while it's backing Brexit either. So maybe you just don't vote at all. Possibly. Certainly, that's the only explanation I can really think of. So like I said, I don't agree with that view, if it exists, but I can understand it. But the bottom line is, I see, no other explanation. I can't account for those missing share of the votes anywhere else. So the message to Labour, buoyed as Corbyn will be with this very welcome win, is that he is still losing votes. He's still losing a share of the votes. That the pro-Brexit votes are lost, that there's no way a party campaigning for a soft Brexit can win them back. The narrative on what Brexit is has completely changed. But also, it's quite clear that Remain votes are up for grabs. And lots of them. Lots of them. Imagine if Labour had backed Remain. How much it could have won by in this election. But Corbyn isn't pushing his position to attract votes. It's to take us out of the EU, but blame others for it. But with the Brexit Party taking votes from mostly Conservative candidates, it could still see Labour ending up in government. Though I'm not sure with an outright majority at the moment. But it's the Conservatives who will surely be the most shaken up by this result. They are losing votes hand over fist to the Brexit Party. They've done it in the European elections. They've done it in Peterborough. Peterborough is actually a reasonable barometer for things in the country. In some constituencies are just a good barometer in terms of swing towards another party in a general election. So what it means is that if a general election were to be held quite soon, we are possibly looking at the long heralded devastation of the Conservative Party. It will help Labour, certainly, as people split their votes between the Conservatives and the Brexit Party. Okay, some potentially also come from Labour, but way, way smaller proportion. The right wing are not used to having their votes split. And I don't think it would be too far-fetched to say that the result may well be a parliament where the Tories are neither in government nor even the largest party in opposition. I still think it would be too far-fetched to say that the party will be finished permanently. Yes, their donors have already dried up, and if they don't even remain the main opposition, they might not come back anytime soon, and a party without donations is in real trouble. So I can certainly see the party radically changing in order to survive, but not actually disappearing up its own arse. So whoever wins the Conservative leadership election will now be utterly desperate to avoid a general election at all costs. Surprise, surprise, Jeremy Corbyn has called for the Conservatives to trigger a general election immediately as soon as the new leader is elected. Zero chance of that. He knows it. The hope for the Conservatives would be that Brexit can still be navigated somehow, and that by the time the general election naturally comes up in 2022, they've somehow won people over again and the Brexit Party will be a spent force. But I fear they are underestimating the aims of Farage's group. Look at who their candidates and backers are. These aren't just people who want the UK to leave the EU. These are people who want power. If a Conservative MP did take us out of the EU, I don't think they would fold like UKIP did after the referendum. They would attack the way it was done. They all know how damaging Brexit actually is, and they will say that that damage is not Brexit but the way it was handled. They're already doing that. They will keep pushing for power. The Tories will never be rid of them no matter what they do regarding Brexit. Today, Nigel Farage has put in a petition effectively to Number 10 to say, I think Brexit Party MEPs should be involved in the Brexit negotiations. Obviously, he'll be told to sling his hook, and then after that he'll say, well, I offered to help and it was refused, and look at the mess we're in now. That's the narrative they are going to push. So the task is simple, isn't it? The new Prime Minister must ensure there is no general election. Only problem is that they will have a majority of 4 in a confidence vote, and there are Tory MPs threatening to bring the government down if we leave the EU without a deal, which of course is the only way to even theoretically leave by the 31st of October. So the new Prime Minister can't take us out on October the 31st, or there'd be an apocalyptic general election. But if the new Prime Minister promises to take us out on October the 31st, as many of them are, deal or no deal, and then doesn't, there are other Tory MPs who have said that they will bring down the government and trigger a general election. So damned if you do and damned if you don't. So the new Conservative leader is now faced with an even more difficult task than faced Theresa May. Just as well, the party is, of course, fielding a large number of leadership candidates who have the intelligence, the political acumen and the problem-solving skills to steer through this quagmire. Maybe not. Anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.